Hello, art historians. So today we're going to begin our new unit on the Indigenous Americas. And so we're going to talk about a lot of really cool, interesting artworks, and man-made structures. What's really cool about doing Indigenous America is that we're going to be looking at things that are very different from what we have looked at before. We're going to be looking at dwellings that are built into the sides of cliffs. We're going to be looking at man-made earthworks. We're going to be looking at fabric pieces. We're going to be looking at a bunch of different types of art. Many times when we look at Indigenous art of Indigenous Americas, a lot of times we talk about craft in that where there's beadwork and there's sewing and there's fabrics and and we haven't seen a lot of that yet. So when we think about the Indigenous Americas, the first thing we're going to think about is we're going to think about North America. And we're going to look at, even though there are similarities, there are very distinct differences between the art of ancient America and Native North America. When we're talking about like how we date things and what their environment was and how their culture was able to continue from antiquity to the present, and where we get our information. Colonization by different European groups, Catholics, Protestants, the British, the French, the Spanish, that helps to, show like the modern political situations and what we did to what we call those Amerindian survivors. We're looking at persecution, genocide, marginalization, and how those experiences shaped their cultural identity and their artistic expression. And so we're going to start with Mesa Verde. So Mesa Verde, or the Mesa Verde cliff dwelling, it is in Montezuma County, Colorado. These are what we refer to as ancestral Puebloan people, except they referred to themselves as the Anasazi. And so while they are ancestors of the Pueblo Indians, they didn't call themselves Pueblo Indians. They called themselves the Anasazi, or they didn't call themselves the Pueblo tribe. They called themselves the Anasazi. Excuse me for saying the word Indian, I apologize. So we're looking at that their civilization from 450 to 1300 CE. It's made out of sandstone. It's built into a cliff face, and it spreads over 81 square miles. So remember, that doesn't mean like it's 81 miles long, but like 81 square miles. What's really cool about this is that it's 150 rooms just in this simple cliff palace, and there are multiple different parts to the Mesa Verde dwelling. This is just the cliff palace that has 150 separate rooms. This sort of circular thing here, that's a room. There are rooms back here in these tall spaces. There's another sunken room there. And there are more than 600 structures total in this Mesa Verde community. And we have to talk a little bit about what its name is. Mesa, meaning table or flat-topped mountain. Verde, meaning green. And you do see some greenery here, but it's very much what feels like very much a desert type environment now, and that is due to naturally occurring climate change. So there was a change in its naturally occurring environment that caused the Anasazi people to move away from this cliff dwelling. So you see here that there are ladders that allowed for the going up and down from different levels. There were also permanent steps built. I'm going to go to the next screen. This lets you know where we are. And so when you're looking at this, we're right here near the Colorado River, we're in the mountains. Your theme here is caves. We're going to study a significant number of caves and things that are built in situ. So one of our first comparisons when we're thinking about things that are built in situ is we're clearly going to think about the Sphinx and also the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, both of those built in situ. So as we're looking at this, you can see that here's the tall, flat, cliff, and here's that little pocket of construction in here. And you see these rooms that are built to accomplish several things. And here's a picture of a sort of an easier picture to see of how it's broken into these pieces. This is the back rear wall. This is, the back rear wall of the cave. Here are the various areas that are built into this cave section. And this shows you some of them were only 1 story high. Some of them were 2 or 3 or even 4 stories high. And so when you're looking here, that's a 4-story tall structure. And so we see that they vary. There's a nice little walkway right here along the front area. And then there were other of the Anasazi people that would have lived down below and would have come up on ladders to visit this sort of area. We see cave paintings here, and it's a very complex construction. So they used some mortar and they used some plaster, but it was a lot of just just rooms that were built out of rocks that are stacked. There are handprints and fingerprints found in the mortar and plaster, which is awesome for archaeologists. It allowed them to sort of see the way that these things were constructed. And we see these cliff dwellings are the best preserved cliff dwellings from this time and period. The Anasazi people were not the only ones to live in cliffs like this. Many Native American tribes lived in cliff dwellings. It kept you away from the animals. It kept you away from attackers. It kept you safe from being caught off guard. They're well protected from the elements, protected you from the sun, from the rain, and that sort of thing. And when you're looking at them, what we're looking at is a major shift in building materials too. Prior to this, most of the homes were made from clay or sand or straw or sticks. Here we're beginning to see rock and mortar and things like that. It allowed for a lifestyle of people because it allowed us to have insight to the lifestyle of these people because of the excellent condition in which it was found, and the way that we were able to determine how they lived. And so what you're looking at here, this round area is called a kiva, K-I-V-A, which is a circular room which holds a fire pit that allows for ventilation. And what's really cool here is you see this fire pit, you see the deflector, that's this, it keeps the smoke going in the right direction. This is a vent. There are multiple vents that allowed the smoke to be pulled out and up. Okay. You see here that this would have been the roof. There would have been a wooden roof set down on top of it. Here's a door into another passageway, and this would have been for sitting or sleeping along the edge here or even along the ground. What is amazing is because of the way that they built these ventilation shafts, it allowed for them to be able to have a fire in an enclosed area without worry of smoke inhalation. A very advanced technology. They were able to build into these rock faces with little sort of catacomb entrances that would allow you to go from one room to another room without having to go back outside, which is really cool because they're all sort of interconnected, but you can see that you can go down into them and you're sort of in your safe little area. I'm sorry, I keep going the wrong way. And what's cool is when you go into your area, you are protected. But you could go from this one to that one via those doors. And so it's a really interesting sort of civilization here. And with as I said, with this construction of these kivas and the banquettes and the roof supports, they had these little mini dwellings. And inside those mini dwellings, we were able to find these, these paintings, these cave paintings, these murals. They were found as wall decoration. They look like rugs. They look like, various geometric forms. Those we assume are supposed to be mountains. We wonder if these are supposed to be mountains. And we do know that this was based on some of their drawings and things that we found in their various trash piles. We do know that this was an agrarian society. They had beans and squash and corn. And what ended up happening was they moved away from the cliffs due to what art historians believe were, like I said, naturally occurring change of climate. This area became prone to drought. There became a lack of resources. They had to start planting their crops further and further and further and further away from, or farther and farther and farther and farther away from their construction. And so eventually when they figured out that their crops were way over here and their building was here, and they just moved. They migrated closer to the more fertile area where their crops were growing due to lack of resources. They settled closer to the water. So that is, our first piece, Colorado. Then we move to this really cool thing, and people are just absolutely fascinated with this. And it is because there are very few of them left. This is an earthwork. So we call it an earthwork, a man-made earthen structure that is meant to look like a snake. Here's the snake's tail. You come this way and this way, this way, this way, and here's the snake's head. Okay. And what's really interesting is sort of some of the ideas and things that go with this. So we're looking at Adams County in Ohio. We're looking at the Mississippian tribe, also called the Eastern Woodlands tribe. They go by both names. And an effigy is a sculpture or model of a particular person or thing. So this is an effigy mound. It's meant to look like a snake. And we know based on, earth and the geological record when this was built, 1070. This is the largest serpent effigy in the world. It is 1,348 feet long, and it rises and falls from various heights from 1 foot high in some places to 3 foot high in other places. There were numerous of these earthenwork mounds made by Native American tribes in the river valleys along the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, the Illinois River, the Missouri River. But what ended up happening is a lot of them were just simply destroyed by farmers as we spread east. And part of it is because unless you're really looking for it, it might not necessarily look like anything. And so many of them were tractored over by farmers and plowed flat. We don't know exactly what its purpose was. There's no written record of it. We do know that this society was agrarian. They subsided on maize and beans and squash. We know that the head is at the east and the tail is at the west, and that there are a total number of 7 sort of points or coils. And we know that the middle Ohio Valley people, that they made lots of snake effigies in wood and in copper and in all sorts of things. And that this has astronomical keys to it. It's that vocabulary word zoomorphic. Again, it's an animal, so it's in the shape of an animal. And when I say astronomical keys, I'm going to show that to you in a minute. But here's a drawing, and it's an engraving done. And here you get that tail, and then you get the loops and the curves, and then you get the serpent's mouth. So let's talk about what we see here, or what we're looking at here. When you look at it, there's big stones, and then smaller stones, and then soil, and then sod. The cross section of it shows art historians and archaeologists that this was not accidentally created. This took time and effort and real thought. We also are able to identify that if you run through the point of the tail and to the point where the snake's mouth opens, that line points to Polaris, true north. We know that if you stand in a spot right here where the three loops are, you stand at this spot right here. This is where the winter solstice sunrise is. This is where the equinox sunrise is. And this is where the summer solstice sunrise is. So we're looking at winter, spring, summer. This is an astronomical astronomical calendar. And it shows us that there is a question about whether this eye of the snake here aligns up with a solar eclipse. It appears to. It appears to be aligned with solar eclipse. It also, some art historians, archaeologists, and scientists believe that this sort of mouth eye that's looking this way, actually, they think that it might have been built to mark the arrival of Halley's Comet in 1066. And remember, that's only every 76 years. And so when you look at its date of construction, 1070, like that huge comet coming across in 1066 would have been a big, big deal. And so they believe that it might have also been built to mark that time period. They believe it was probably a place of worship for people who worshiped the snake. There's a belief that some of the platforms that sit here at these curves may have held totem poles. But again, without written record and without really being able to track the people that created it, it's a little harder to know exactly what was going on. But we do know it was purposeful. We do know that for absolute true, this line from here, the tail to the bottom of the head, that's true north. That is how you see true north. We do know for sure that this marks, these equinoxes or these sunrises. We know that you would mark Halley's Comet from there because we've had Halley's Comet return since then. So there are beliefs that that is its purpose. I'm going to do one more today, and then we'll be done for today. This is your Bandolier bag by the Lenape tribe. And so what's interesting is it's the Lenape people, the Delaware tribe of the Eastern Woodlands. And it has a whole bunch of names, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. It is made of beadwork on leather. It also contains animal hide, that's what you see back here, and cotton cloth. It also contains silk ribbons and glass beads and wool yarn and metal cones. I hate that the description from the College Board is as empty as it is. I think that they really should say hide and cotton and silk and glass and wool and metal cones, and I think it's important. We're talking about thousands of these little tiny, what they call seed beads, glass beads, and it is based on, this bag is based on the ammunition bags that European soldiers would have carried when they carried their guns, their rifles. They would have kept their ammunition in a bag. There are lots of tribes that make these sort of bandolier bags, and there are stylistic differences in each of them. And it differed by tribe, what natural materials were available, what traded materials were available. This sits across the body, and the bag sits at your hip, and then this part goes across your neck. Okay, and these were very popular in the late 1800s. Now, what's interesting about this is we're dealing with the Delaware tribe, and the Lenape people. And if you know anything about the Lenape people, you know that they're, Pennsylvania-y, Delaware-y. But this was found in Oklahoma. And the reason that it made its way to Oklahoma is there was the Indian Removal Act of 1830 that moved Native Americans out of their own tribal lands and out west to Oklahoma, Wisconsin, just to relocate them. And so what we see here is already the fact that this was found in Oklahoma, but made Delaware, Pennsylvania area. We see that this is the result of Native Americans being relocated. So men would use them, women would create them, and they were used to complement a ceremonial outfit. And they were made from very inexpensive trade cotton that was then sewn to hide after it had been beaded. And so I'm going to go forward. And so you can see these little teeny tiny hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these little beads. And the beads were inexpensive as well. They're called seed beads. They came from European traders, and they would often trade, these seed beads for, Native American fabrics, Native American paintings, Native American artifacts, pottery, things like that. The silk ribbons are also from the traders. Okay. And we're looking at, new materials that were used by Native Americans to introduce like a variety of textures and feels. So you have the really fine, soft silk and the little bit harder cotton. And this is wool fabric, wool thread. And these are metal cones. Then all of this stuff is beaded with those little glass Italian European seed beads. And then it's all mounted on animal hide. And so, we look at the fact that it has lots of texture, it has lots of varied medium. We also see that we have that they are frequently the pattern on them is symmetrical. And what we see here is often the contrasting colors of the blue of the sky and the sort of reddish of the earthly or the worldly. And so, we often see things that happen in fours in Native American art, to the four directions, the four winds, and so four is a big number in Native American design. And so what we're looking at is really just a really beautiful piece of Native American art that is then, it suffers from its removal from one place to the next. It belonged out east where it was made. It ended up out west. And it changed sort of the way that the people continued to create art. So those are our pieces today. The Bandolier bag of the Lenape people, the Great Serpent Mound of the Mississippian or the Eastern Woodlands, and the Mesa Verde cliff dwelling of the Anasazi, sometimes called the ancestral Puebloan people. I hope you had a good time and learned some interesting thing about Native Americans, and we will be back again next time.